Good morning, everyone. Let's give the attendees a few seconds to join us. Okay, we can get started. Welcome to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority Special Audit Committee. Today is Monday, April 20th, 2026. This meeting is being recorded. Commissioner Slauson,
Here.
Commissioner Saunders, Commissioner Stringer.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, thank you very much for being here today. I want to get started with the first item on the agenda, which is acceptance of the minutes, including any corrections. Let me see. I have no corrections to the minutes, Commissioner Stringer.
I was not here, so
You weren't, okay.
yeah.
Then,
I'll
all right.
abstain from any.
You'll abstain. Then I'd say accepted, and let's move on to the item number 2, which is we're lucky to have Justin Measley here from on Zoom to answer a few questions related to the draft audited financial statements and single audit report. Just want to make sure he gets up on the screen. And also for the folks on doing the audio, if there's any problems with the audio, can you just let us know right away on this? Thanks. Just want to make sure we got it recording properly. All right. So, Justin, thank you very much for being here. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions and also give the chance for Commissioner Stringer to ask some questions related to where we are at with the single audit documentation. On Friday evening at about 7:30 p.m., I received a draft of the financial statements, supplementary information, and single audit reports that were labeled the 17th of the month. And we also noted they were subject to change. It's a fairly complex 55-page document. It wasn't complete. It was missing a corrective action plan and a few other things that I think might be misstated, which I can get into later. Obviously, it wasn't a lot of time for the members of this committee to review it, and I was hoping to have it earlier. Can you tell me, first of all, how it's been going working with LAHSA staff to get to this draft?
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. As far as the draft, I just put some dates over. So if you see me looking over to the side, I don't have the dates memorized. But initial draft was sent over to LAHSA on April 3rd. And then we received comments back from LAHSA on the 10th of April. So about a week later. On a Friday. On that Monday, the 13th, we had followed up to request a meeting so we could go over some of the comments just because there was a disconnect between our understanding and their understanding. 2 days later, we received another email with comments without having a meeting. So we were able to finally meet on the 15th to walk through their comments, make sure we were on the same page with respect to issues in the draft. Which is why then on the 17th you would have received a revised draft that incorporated those comments. So just from the 3rd to the 17th, obviously it's a decent chunk of time, much more than we were expecting, just based on the last conversation I had with you all. I can't really speak to why that is. I would kind of have to defer to management.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. I just want to get it from your perspective. And then could you please tell us what still needs to happen to get to a final draft? I think there's a quality control step. There's a rep letter. Can you explain what the process is to get to our single audit to make it complete?
Sure. Yeah. So back on, I guess I'm assuming it was the 3rd, we did receive all of our comments from quality control review. So we've already addressed those comments. We're just waiting to send it back until we receive the corrective action plan and all of their comments were addressed. There were a few things we were waiting on from LAHSA. So we did receive the corrective action plan at, I guess, I'm not sure, 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, so right before this meeting, I saw an email come through. So we did receive the corrective action plan. So based on that, I'm not able to look at it today, but tomorrow I should be able to send the audit back to the QC reviewer. They'll just based on whatever else is in their queue. I'm hoping within 24 hours they should be able to get into that, clear their comments, whether they have any follow-up questions, etc. But they would just have to go back through, ensure all of their comments are addressed. At that point, we'll get the essentially it would be ready to issue pending the management representation letter from LASA. But once I have all that information, I can date the report.
Okay, so it's a couple days worth of work to get to a final draft.
Yep, and not just yeah, but more so just needing we work on a first in first out basis, so just based on the queue. Not that it would be
Understood.
days of work, but more of days of potentially getting through
No,
the.
I understand. Thank you.
Yep.
And then, from a governance standpoint, I know that you do a lot of these single audits. What could you just explain what the best practices are in terms of the audit committee, so our committee's involvement in the full commission or the equivalent of a board in looking at these statements and voting to approve them, or how does it usually work? And how much, what's the timeline usually of that?
Yeah, I would say that's a tough question to answer uniformly because it isn't uniform across the board. I would say every client has a little bit of a different process. I can speak very high level to what I've seen generally works the best. So generally, when you do have an audit committee or an audit and finance committee and a full commission, generally the audit and finance committee is the one doing most of the heavy lifting with respect to doing an actual detailed review of the statements, and asking any questions like you're doing right now with respect to the process and the conclusions. Generally, we present a draft to the audit and finance committee, so that they do have the opportunity to ask those questions if they do have any changes, etc. Once we go final and the report's issued, that is what it is. So we generally present a draft to the audit and finance, and then this is where I would say the most lack of consistency across the board is on whether the audit and finance essentially does their approval or their motion, whatever it might be, and from there we go final and essentially just present final reports to the full board, where the board generally will take the committee's recommendation for approval. That the committee's already gone through that process of reviewing the statements, whereas the board approval is more of a motion versus something where there's actual a heavy review being done at that point. I would say that's generally what we see. And then as far as timing, I mean, all commissions and committees generally would like a few weeks to review. So we normally will work with management on what the committee's expectation is and make sure we work back into that.
Yeah, thank you. Usually a few weeks. Okay. Yeah, we've had very little time to look at this. And we had still actually, we received, kind of like you, we received a corrective action plan. I just got it when I got in today, this morning, which is part of the document. Finally, on the process part of it, the representation letter, in your experience, who usually signs that?
It's normally someone senior in the finance department, as well as normally the most senior individual in management. So whether it be the president, executive director, and then normally the director of finance or the controller. Just because obviously it's heavily in the financial audit, but then we also like to get it's essentially management's representations. So two members of management would be signing.
Two members usually of management would sign.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to pull out and just to make sure I've got some stuff clear because is that on statement on the report that we received, the draft report. I'm working off the one dated on the 17th, not the one that I received this morning. On page 1, it states, and I just want to make sure we're completely clear. It states that you, Clifton Larson, are not responsible for the accuracy of the financial statements. It's management's responsibility, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep, and that's the representation letter. Okay. And another question I have on that says on page 2, there under the auditor's responsibilities, one of the things that is your responsibility is to obtain an understanding of the internal controls relevant to the audit. Can I ask you, in the case of the work you've done for LASA, how did you obtain an understanding of the internal controls of LASA? Did you look at internal control documents or a COSO agreement or framework, or how did you get a sense of the internal controls at LASA?
Sure. Given that this is an initial audit year, we do have some historical information that we can rely on that we've obtained over the years. An initial audit year, I would say yes, we generally would obtain whatever sort of underlying documents the organization might have with respect to finance, procurement, disbursement process, et cetera. Make sure we gain an understanding of that, document the relevant controls for the specific assertions we deem to be relevant for our audit process. And then if we deem that area to be a higher risk of material misstatement, we'll do walkthroughs of those controls, ensuring that the controls in place, in effect, operating effectively, et cetera. So generally, I would say for the current year, it would have been via inquiry, discussion with members of management, those that are actually performing the controls themselves, and then just walking through those controls for any, again, that we deem to be a higher risk of material misstatement.
Okay, got you. But technically, because if you read further in your letters, you don't express an opinion on the effectiveness of LASA's controls, correct? So you look at them, but you don't express an opinion on those. So in other words, staff's responsible for providing the numbers to you. You look at them, make sure everything is presented logically within what they deliver to you. But you're not pressing in on our internal controls to make sure we're compliant with our requirements to our funders. Beyond the four corners of the documents that you receive. And I just wanted to make sure that we level set expectations that this isn't what your work isn't kind of in-depth look at our internal controls. It's kind of you reference those in relation to the work that you're looking at that's provided to you by LASA. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a very fair, and I would say a very important I guess call out would be that our audit, if we do have an issue, if we were to issue an audit without any sort of findings or anything that cannot be taken to say that the absence of any exceptions or any reportable findings mean that there aren't any internal control issues. The goal of our audit is not to issue a report on internal controls. With respect to our gaining an understanding of controls in place, a lot of that is primarily tied to our risk assessment, so that we're able to address any sort of risks with respect to financial statement line items. We gain an understanding of those controls so that we can reduce some of our testing if applicable. Really just gaining an understanding of the overall control environment to be able to conclude with respect to our risk assessment as it tailors or drives our sample sizes and it's part of our testing, et cetera. But yes, I would say overall, the goal is not to issue an internal control report. Any findings we might issue, and it does say that within the report. Anything that we might say, it isn't limited to say that there are no material weaknesses. If we do identify significant deficiencies, it doesn't mean these are the only significant deficiencies. It's truly based on the work that we perform.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna get a question, ask you a question about that in a minute. But one thing I did want to dive into is one specific note 13 on page 36. You can probably tell I spent a lot of time over the weekend with these documents, looking at them pretty carefully. There's a related party transaction, and I wanted to ask you how that was disclosed to you.
It was not. It was identified as part of one of our audit procedures. We were reviewing articles, essentially external information, anything that may be in the news with respect to LASA, and we noticed an article with respect to essentially what it discloses in the footnote that there were approvals done by a member of management.
Yeah.
So from there, this was, if you would see a difference between the original draft several weeks ago and the most recent draft, that was part of a consultation of our quality control reviewer on whether it did rise to the level of something to be disclosed in accordance with the applicable standards. And that's what we found that it was.
Yeah, I had asked for a red line version of the 17th versus the 3rd, but I didn't get it. But I did notice that this note 13 was actually not in the earlier version. That's one of the reasons why I want to ask it.
Yep.
But also you assert here that in the same note that LASA had no other significant related party transactions, commitments, or guarantees. That's just it's not based on any assertion from LASA. It's just from things that you might have picked up in the media.
No. So to, I guess, paint a better picture of this. So as part of our, the article is what triggered us knowing about this specifically. We did perform additional procedures over, I believe it's your Form 700s that were implemented in this past year. We did obtain those, identified any sort of related party transactions that might relate to current year disbursements. That was sort of how we corroborated that there wasn't anything additional we needed to be aware of that might be out there. And then finally, there is a representation in the rep letter that there are, all appropriate related parties are disclosed within the financial statements. Obviously, we're required to corroborate when we can, but in some situations, we do rely on inquiry.
The rep letter. Yeah, understood. Okay. I know, but that's good. You did diligence on Form 700. It's great. A question on page 39. I'm a little confused at what it means on note 1, the budgetary reporting, that the legal level of budgetary control is at the fund level. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So this would so I think this is likely going to would be more clear or relevant for an agency that has multiple opinion units. Um, uh, LASA having essentially a general fund. That's one fund, one opinion unit, and then two different departments under that, essentially operations and programmatic. That what that's stating there is that the budget's approved at the fund level, so the general fund level, and not down at the department operations and programmatic level. So you'll see that there's differences between budget and actual between the two. However, because it's done at the fund level and not at that program level, essentially it isn't a like a legal compliance issue for the budget that was approved being either over or under.
But we basically have one fund.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So there's not multiple funds. Like in another environment, there are multiple funds. If we did
Yes.
that kind of fund, I'm not going to say fund accounting, but that kind of fund, because we are doing fund accounting, we have a single fund. But okay, understood.
For reporting purposes, yes. So that's where it gets a little confusing. And LASA
Yeah.
has several funds because they
Yeah, no.
contain, yes, but for reporting purposes, one fund. And because in this situation it's at the fund level, not at the program or department level, that would be a different situation.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 50, there's one thing that changed also based on the previous draft, that there's a finding that's required to be reported under federal awards number 3. That box used to be checked yes, and now it's checked no. Is that right, or am I getting it confused?
No, that should be marked yes.
Okay.
I looked back in between. Well, there was one change in between that original draft you would have seen with respect to that finding specifically. So when we look at a finding, so finding 2025-002 is specifically in a uniform guidance finding. And in those situations, there's essentially two aspects of that finding, internal control and then compliance. Originally, we were reporting it as both an internal control issue and a compliance issue, an other matter. So essentially, with respect to compliance, we either have an other matter or we have a material non-compliance, which would result in essentially opinion modification over that program. So based on conversations with management, we agreed that or I'm comfortable with reporting that is solely an internal control issue. We did not find any sort of non-compliance specific to that finding. So between the two drafts, that other matter was removed. The uniform guidance language was updated to solely have it as an internal control issue. And it looks like there was a third change made that should not have been made with respect to updating that schedule from yes to no.
Okay, no, thanks. I was a little confused by that, but
Yep.
I got it now. Thanks for explanation. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about, and I really appreciate your time because I know you spent a lot of time with LASA working on this. Still have a little bit ways to go. It's on page 51 with the findings, and one of your findings is that we have significant deficiency in internal control over our financial reporting, which I know wasn't the point of your audit. It's something that kind of comes up. It came up in the course of it. And you recommend that LASA enhance its financial close process. Can you explain what you mean by the financial close process?
Sure. So I would say that that finding, if we're going to get into the details, is there's essentially two drivers of that. One was a material adjustment provided late in the audit process. Anytime we have adjustments that we're maybe not aware of that are coming, if we're essentially provided context that management's reconciling an account. Hey, here's a trial balance, but we're going to provide you with an an adjustment to post during the audit. That's a different situation from providing a trial balance that's ready for audit. And then as a part of, throughout the audit process, whether it be audit inquiry or management becoming later aware of an adjustment needed, that's where we're then required to sit back and evaluate whether or not that is indicative of a control deficiency. We look at a number of factors to make that determination. The magnitude, dollar value, the severity, and just putting it into context. So for this issue specifically, we were provided with a late adjustment in mid-March of 2026, related to leases. And the second thing, or the second driver here, is just overall timing of the audit, being provided late deliverables. This isn't a one-year situation with the audit process going right up against the deadline. So in this situation, the enhancement I would say is revisiting the financial close schedule when items are reconciled, when essentially the trial balance is available for audit. There is not specific guidance out there for what's deemed to be a reasonable financial close process, but the GFOA did put out some brief guidance, essentially 6 months. So I think that LASA should work to being ready for audit by December 31st. And ensuring, as part of that entails preparation of the financial statements, making sure material items are reconciled, et cetera, so that when the auditors do come in, assuming in that situation would be January of the following year, they can hit the ground running and there aren't delays with the audit process. So it's an intentionally overarching finding, because I don't think that we would pinpoint one specific area that I would tighten up. I think there needs to be an overall revisitation of what the current schedule is, what the current milestones are, what accounts are reconciled and when, and take a look at what needs to be tightened up to ensure that LASA doesn't have issues with meeting its 3/31 deadline in the future.
Yeah, gotcha. And your course, you mentioned the COSO or internal control integrated framework. Was that something that you looked at LASA?
Not specifically. No, I would say that's like the benchmark you would model it off of.
It's the framework you use the COSO cube or whatever to use to model it, to make sure that
Yep.
controls. Okay, thank you. That's what I've got. Commissioner Stringer.
That was very thorough. I'm good. Thank you.
It was thorough. I'm impressed. You got a lot done this weekend.
I spent many hours going through this weekend. I appreciate your time and also your responses after hours as well. Thank you, and appreciate it. All right, then I'll close off that item. I think you're dismissed, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, feel free to reach out to me if there are any questions from the committee.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you both.
Right. All right. Okay. Next up is Gita for discussion and governance process related to the single audit. Thank you for being here, Gita. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And sorry, I was late this morning. We've had several meetings already with our staff about our layout process and have our union meeting today. So it's been a lot over the weekend and trying to get all of that ready for the union meeting. So
I appreciate you being here in the context, and I only have a couple of questions for you. I don't want to keep you very long to get back to that. I've got a lot more for the finance team, but on page 13 of the audit, it's the draft reads that quote, questions concerning any of the information provided in this report should be addressed to Janine Trejo, Chief Financial Officer. Is that accurate?
Well, I think since that we've had Ms. Trejo's out of the office, so we have listed a position for an acting CFO. It's currently live on LASA's website. I think having that position filled will be really helpful, and will also help us to fulfill a lot of Mr. Measley's great suggestions. He, I think, pointed out a lot of the things that we can do across the board to actually help make LASA's process a lot more uniform. I think having this audit committee also kind of be revitalized in a way that it hasn't been in the past. Having Aram here as a CAE is really helpful. And we are downsizing, but I think that will give us a lot of opportunity to also kind of reconfigure the finance team and really help us kind of hone down on suggestions that Mr. Measley has made, suggestions that our finance team sees, and actually, as importantly, suggestions that KPMG is seeing. We're in the middle of their reporting and looking at our finance structure. I think that's going to be really helpful for us going forward to make sure we're, doing a lot of the things that Mr. Mazie said, like starting to be ready for the single audit by December 31st, instead of waiting, instead of staff not maybe knowing exactly who to notify in the future. I think we'll have the staff understand they have to tell the CFO, they have to tell the CEO. The CEO then will, be in charge of telling the commission and the chair, so that everyone's in the loop and understanding the process going forward. So I think a lot of those things will be really helpful.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I feel vitalized as a committee. I think that this is a vitalized. No, we're vitalized. And also, I want to also mention that the CAE and ARM is an internal audit process, which is completely separate from the oversight of the single audit. I'm just, I know.
It's great to have one more set of eyes here. We really appreciate it.
100%. No, it's great. But my question is that in this document that we're going to submit and upload, who is going to be, we have the name of somebody who is not, who is that accurate to leave that clause written as it is?
She is not here. She's out of the office. So things like this do happen with all kinds of documents like this. So we will be able to, Janine Lim and I will be able to sign for it, if that's your question.
No, well, I mean, the question is, in the actual audit that we're doing, the draft, so it'll be who's the person who's going to be responsible for the financial statements that's written in the draft. I'm going to ask about the rep letter in a minute.
Yeah, I think that would be Janine Lim and I. Yeah.
Janine Lim and Peta. So then we'll change that on page 13 to the two of you. Okay. And then the representation letter is the person who ultimately is responsible for the financial statements and internal controls. Who's going to sign?
Yeah, I think that because Ms. Trejo is out, we will have to do that.
So it's going to be Janine Lim
Yes.
and you, Gita, are going to sign the representation letter.
Okay, yeah, but we're going to have a discussion with Janine about that. So we'll have to answer that in a minute.
All right. Okay, so we don't know who's going to sign it. Okay. And then I think that we know that this single audit was due on March 31st. The auditor sent a letter that you forwarded to the commission on March 3rd.
Yes.
That warned that we were going to likely, or had a good chance of missing the deadline. There were warning signs that were there earlier. And I just want to understand why that neither you nor your staff reported those to the commission or the audit committee. Can you explain why you waited?
I think many years in the past, things like this have happened. I think last year, Ms. Trejo informed me she paid an expedited fee to have the documents read over a weekend. I don't think anyone in finance knew that was available to us. Otherwise, we would have done that. I think that many times LAHSA has gone by the seat of its pants to get things done, and we are here to change that. So we are going to next year have a process that is not relying on one or two people, but a procedure that, as Mr. Measley has recommended, is much more transparent, open. And again, it is great that we have a revitalized, I think is a compliment, so not a negative, committee to help us. So I think also getting an acting CFO will help us, because sometimes when people are working in the same agency for years and years, you forget to look outside, and maybe there's best practices have changed or different ways of doing it. I think that'll also help to have a temporary person in here to help do that.
Thanks. And I think that kind of you've asked, we moved this meeting at your request.
Yep.
It was supposed to be on the 15th, moved to the 20th to give us more time. Even so, like basically I think you're kind of asking this committee to vote to approve a draft, which isn't final, that we received on Friday evening, and it's Monday. Do you think, like, in terms of governance best practices, do you think that's adequate?
I think that for many years, LAHSA has given this draft form earlier to the committee so they could read the bulk of it to the committee and the commission. And then at the end, the committee votes. I think in the future, it would be a better practice to do it much earlier. Again, to start the audit in December, to have it ready by December 31st, per Mr. Measley's suggestion, and really have it be a much more open cadence. It's, in the past, it seems like they pulled in the audit committee, LAHSA pulled in the audit committee only at the finding stage and not earlier. So I think it would be better if we started earlier, started in December, notified the commission, all of those things early, so there isn't a rush. It's my understanding, though, that quite frequently it becomes a rush because of our current finance team was doing our single audit. We had a audit from the county that we asked them to put aside until the single audit was done. They did not do that. We also had, as you know, and that's been in the paper, trying to get the advance money out there for the providers. Those functions, those three important things are all done by the same people at LASA in finance. We hope that that maybe will change, but we are being downsized, not upsized. So we just have to be able to configure the finance department next year so it's more efficient with less people. So that will be a challenge, but we will absolutely get that done because I think with, you know, the new people we have here, I think we'll be able to do it with no problem.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Commissioner Stringer, you have any questions?
Thank you for being here. I know you've got a lot going on,
Thank you.
and I'm sorry for that. Are you recommending approval today?
I am. I think we need to get this audit completed. I know there's two minor, you know, the 3 timesheets, the leases that are on there. We will work, you know, we've already actually fixed the issues around the timesheets, which were 3 out of 40 out of a control group that were found, and leases. So I do recommend that because we do want to have this heard by the full commission for their questions on Friday and then uploaded to the
Yeah.
Federal Registry on
Yeah.
Friday.
Okay. Thank you. And
Okay.
was there anything more that Janine, you wanted to add to that, or anybody?
I've got, yeah.
Janine Lim, Deputy CFO. I just want to note that the changes from 4.3 to the 4.8 draft that you have and the minor changes that will happen after this are considered to be immaterials. There's no material change. These changes that happened between draft 4.3 and 4.8 were mostly due to small corrections and typos that we just wanted accurately represented in the report.
That was going to be my follow-up. So, so as it sits right now, the changes going forward are all sort of immaterial changes, edits, cleaning things up, dotting
Immaterial.
I's, crossing T's, things like that. And will that occur between now and Friday's meeting?
There are 7 corrections from the draft that you have in your hand now that we submitted to CLA last week that were of the same nature, typos, small corrections in certain areas that we just want to make sure are corrected for the record.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Geeta. Appreciate you being here. And, you know, you can go and then, yeah. And then, but Janine is up next with a discussion related to the financial statements. Hi there. Hi, Janine. Thank you for being here today. I know you've got a lot of things going on. I apologize for not being able to get you questions in advance.
Sure.
And I also know that you're the person who's best suited to respond to these questions inside of LASA. So I appreciate you being here today. I didn't have a lot of time to put together the questions, but I went through things carefully. And I just wanted to start on page 5, where you know, Clifton Larson says that we ought to pay attention to our net position as an indicator of whether the financial position of LASA is improving or deteriorating. And then on page 6, we took one hit that we took was on the addition of new master lease agreements during fiscal year 2025, which is kind of represented in on page 6, related to our non-current liabilities that increased by about $11 million. Can you describe what's driving that increase?
Describe the increase that is.
The of the non-current liabilities on page 6. Yeah, the increase of $11 million on page 6 of the statement of net position.
This is all stated in the actual audit report. So the increase, when you have leases, you will have capital assets, and then you have to record their according liabilities. So if we have leases, we also have a liability to pay them. So master lease came on at that time, and so that would therefore increase our liabilities.
So, okay, well, so this was master lease. What exactly, can you describe what the master leases were?
So LASA took on a number of new leases during that time when our master leasing program began.
Okay, and that increased so that's there's some other master leases kind of there's a thread through these financials related to I
Yeah,
think that program. So I've got a couple other questions related to it. On page 7, the operating expenses, and I think I understand this, and I just want to make sure I'm clear. On page 7, the operating expenses increased by 75 million. Is this related to the grant revenue increase at 80 million that's described on the top of page 4? So basically, the operating expenses went up because we have 80 million in grant revenue that went up. Is that how those two are tied together?
yes, as stated at the bottom of that page, will explain why the operating expenses also increased in proportion to the increase in funding.
Okay, so yeah. So got it. And then on page 12, I'm not sure I understand the 17 million increase on our right to use asset buildings. That increased by almost 18 million. So I'll let you get there because I know I'm jumping around a little bit. But what's driving that right to use asset buildings category, that increase of $17 million from 24 to 25?
I'll have to look into that. However, I'm guessing the right to use is related to also our leases. So once you have a new lease, you then have the right to use that lease. And I'm assuming that's why it is, but I will have to look into that.
So it's because we took on long-term liabilities, basically that increased that
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to make sure that that is the case.
Okay. And then, yeah, and then this is again, I think these are all related to master leasing issues on page 14 in our statement of position. Our 1 year and more than 1 year lease liabilities went up. So if you look at it's by quite a bit. So is that also the master lease reflected there?
Correct.
Okay. Got it. So all right. And then on page 22, you state that LASA uses an interest rate that's charged by the lessor at the discount rate, as a discount rate, excuse me, by the interest rate charged by the lessor as the discount rate. What's the rate that's used for that?
I will have to look into that.
Okay. On page 31, I see that we will pay 13 million in principal and 4 million in interest payments related to leases in 2026. That's the projection. Right? I just want to make sure you get to that. So you see for 2026, the principal payments 13 million, the interest is 4 million. So that reflects kind of a 34% interest rate that we're paying on that. What's going on with that? What's it for?
I will have to look into that.
And just generally looking at this chart, we're on the hook for $75 million in lease payments no matter what for the next 6 years. I mean, that's what it looks like here.
What I want to make clear here is that the purpose of the net position is to state over the long term and to assess over the long term whether LASA has the ability to cover its liabilities.
Yep.
So as looking at the statement of net position and the auditor's opinion, it is the auditor's opinion that LASA does have the assets and resources to cover its long-term liabilities.
I think that's defined as 12 months, which we're already 9 months into that.
Can you repeat that?
I think that's defined. I think that the ability for LASA to move forward as a going concern and the opinion related to that is based on a 12-month window.
Sure. And
we're
both the
9 months into
statement,
that.
sure, and both the statement of net position as well as the balance sheet of the general fund also both function to show that LASA can cover its liabilities in the short term and the long term. And that is the auditor's opinion at this point.
Yeah, the long term is 12 months after the end of the close of this FY25. So, I mean, I'm just saying that there's 75, we're on the hook, the way I understand it, we're on the hook for total minimum lease payments of $75 million through 2032 on page 31. And what I understand too is that the way that we're paying that in 2026, for example, we have principal payments of 13 million. We have interest of 4 million. That's almost 30-something% interest. I'm just trying to understand what's going on.
We can get back to you on those minute details.
I think it's major details, but yeah. And then on speaking of long-term liabilities, on page 33, we have about 80 million in long-term liabilities from the county, right? That's listed there, advance from the county. How we got there is laid out in the footnote, which is good. My question is, though, if some of the service providers paid back advances, which I think they did, why is the balance the same in June 2024 and June 2025? The balance doesn't change when you look at the advance from county on page 33 of 80,900,000. It's the same in June 30th, 2025. At the bottom of that footnote, it says that there was some Measure H service providers turned in money. I don't understand why that, and maybe I'm missing something. I might be confused. Why that liability didn't go down if we collected money.
I will have to look into that.
Okay. Did we collect money in 2025 from the recoupments from the advance from the county?
Yes, we did.
We did. Okay. That's what I thought. And then on page 41, our actual revenues are 120 million under budget. Can you explain what was driving that? Why we're so under budget?
I don't know what the driver is here. We have to remember that these budgetary comparisons are actually are being examined under just 1 year. So there might be
Timing issues.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's a substantial I mean, and the timing issues you'd think would come out in the way we plan our budget because we know what the timing issues are. But okay.
There could be budgets that are multi-year. So you're not seeing a full picture here. You're only seeing the picture for 1 year.
Yep. Okay. Then all staying on that same page, on the capital expenditures / outlay line. In the original budget, there was nothing. In the final budget, there was nothing. The actuals were 20 million. What is that? Who authorized it? What's going on with that?
Again, it's for the same reason. These could be according to budgets that are multi-year, and this budgetary comparison schedule only looks at 1 year. So it could be part of a larger budget that falls in outer years that this deficit could be applied to.
But it wasn't budgeted. I mean, what's in the capital expenditures outlay line item? How is that defined?
I will have to look at what falls under that.
Yeah, I have questions. I mean, I don't understand.
Sure, we can answer them.
Okay. And then we didn't, and I see that this morning received, but I didn't see a corrective action plan for the findings that were, we had we had 2 findings. There was no corrective action plan that was amended to the reports that were sent to us. What's going on with that?
The corrective action plan was supplied just this morning.
Just this morning. Okay. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I don't know if Commissioner Stringer did, but it's hard to get stuff to the last second like that.
We understand.
Those are my questions. I have more, but I'm going to hold back. But I think it's thorough enough. Commissioner Stringer.
No, you're thorough. That is for sure. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
I'm just catching up on this, obviously. But on page 31, I'm assuming that those interest calculations are based on the full amount owned, kind of like a mortgage that we all.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's relatively easy to explain, and that the interest rates in the 3.5 to 8.5%, I assume is market for this kind of stuff. So, I mean,
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
So I'm
assume that
not,
I would
I'm not
agree.
alarmed by those numbers. And I understand if you just do the math on 4 million against 13 million, you get a big number, but I don't think that's what's happening there. And I
Um,
also understand we have some big lease liabilities that are challenging,
Yes. we do.
especially as we go through our transition this summer. And I'm as aware of that as I can be at this point in time. But
Thank you. Yeah, I
I
have
get
a
it.
few things in the works to.
Yeah, I know you do. And I know you're super busy. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And just on our agenda, that was a discussion, that was item number 4 that we just finished, which is related to draft audit financials. Do you want to comment on the corrective action plan, or what you sent us? Because I just want to give you the opportunity to do that if you want to. I haven't read it, but if you want to talk about what we're going to be doing to address that, I'd be happy to give you an opportunity to do that. And you don't have to read it out. I mean, but you can talk about what the plan is, or you can read it out. You do whatever you want.
Okay, so the corrective action plan is according to 2 of the findings that we have. The recommendation is that LASA enhance its financial close, including timely reconciliation and review of materials, and establish clear milestones to ensure accurate and timely financial reporting. The cap is stated generally to address that recommendation in acknowledging that it will strengthen its financial close, determine that carryover amounts, ensure timely determination of carry amounts impacting the year end. We will establish earlier communication deadlines with our funders, and we will reinforce timely reconciliation and review of material accounts at the part of the fiscal year end close. As Geeta had already stated, we recognize that some of our process needs to be tightened up, and that we are going to start our financial close process earlier. We also have the support of KPMG to now identify some areas where we can strengthen our process internally, so that next year we do not have these problems. The next finding is in relation to the timesheet finding. That finding was related to approved timesheets. About, I think it's 3 out of 40 timesheets were not reviewed. We are already addressing this now at the chief level with a process in place to make sure that timesheets are approved timely.
Okay. And thank you. When you mentioned financial close process, you mean your annual financial close process?
Correct.
Okay. So not a monthly reconciliation.
This cap refers to our yearly close
Annual
process.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Item number 6 is a request to review and approve the draft audited statements. I was going to say I am going to vote to move this to our full commission. I'm not going to vote to approve it. My vote is going to be a no vote to actually approve it in this commission, but we're going to take a vote anyway. But
And I'm going to move to approve it based on staff recommendation. So it sounds like we have a split.
sounds like we have a split. Yep.
I don't know. I guess that means it doesn't move forward, but right. So motion fails.
All right, let's go on to item number 7, the update on the current and prior audits. I'll turn it over to Aram. Thank you very much. Aram, appreciate it, you being here. And if you could take us through the update on the current and prior audits. And we're talking about internal audit here. So changes.
Can I just, sorry, things are moving fast. Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back? And my motion is to move to approve subject to the modifications that we discussed, the immaterial modifications. Yeah. I's and T's. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I understand that it failed.
Yeah, I want to provide some context to it. I just, I don't think it's, I don't think we had sufficient time to review this. And I think that it's necessary for the full commission to take it on and to review it. And I think that based on the guidance that was given by our external auditor in terms of best practices by other groups, I think that makes sense. I think that it's a good idea if the full commission then takes it up. We have a meeting coming up later this week. That'll give some people some time to look at it. And I think they can take a look at it and we can hit it at that meeting.
My mic doesn't work.
Here you go.
So I'm not disagreeing with any of that. But I am stating, and the reason I made my motion is to support the very hard work of staff under extremely trying circumstances. And I'm satisfied with the corrective action that was just described to us. And I'm satisfied with the state of the audit report and the fact that there are only material changes. I do, however, look forward to a full discussion at the commission meeting on Friday, and I would expect that either way. So
thank you. And I also would like to acknowledge that I really appreciate the staff and the hard work that's been done, especially Janine Lim. I really appreciate the work that you've done. I know you've been working very hard on this. I know that the situation hasn't been easy. I know there's been changes in the management during this process that haven't been helpful. And I know you're doing what you can, and it's not easy. So thank you very much. So there's no, no vote is no reflection on the hard work of the staff. It's a reflection on what I think is a good practice for governance, which I think we need. And we need time to be able to review something that's as complicated as this and have a longer discussion about it. So, but thank you. I appreciate it, Commissioner Stringer. And let's move on to then item number 7 is update on current and prior audits. Again, we're we've just moved from the single audit realm to the internal audit realm now. So these have nothing to do with each other except for the word audit. And Aram, appreciate you taking us through this and going through the situation we're in now.
No.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll provide a brief update on current audit activities and related administrative items. So the first item here is COC underspend audit. It was a prior audit. We have we completed our review of underspend. And we took our findings to the management of COC team to review audit results, and we are expecting their management response by the end of this week. We will be meeting with the finance and grants management, contract performance and compliance team this week to obtain their responses as well. Following this, we will proceed towards finalizing the report.
Okay, great. That's the COC underspend audit.
That's right.
That was started back in 2024, which is almost finished. And we just got to meet with the finance team to get their feedback, and then you'll be able to present those findings to the next audit committee.
That's correct.
Great.
And then currently we are working on signatory authority and delegation review. We're in the fieldwork phase of the signature authority review, including testing of contracts, amendments, and invoice approvals for compliance with delegated authority requirements. Next is our provider invoice. So the signatory authority review was, this audit was approved by audit committee. It was recommended by audit committee actually, and the next audit that we're doing, it's approved, it's per our approved audit plan, which is provider invoice processing and payment controls. So we sent out the intent to audit letter last week, and we will be moving into the planning and fieldwork phases coming week. And then I have a few more updates regarding the internal audit, the audit committee. So in the last committee meeting, we were asked for the IIA membership for the audit committee members and internal audit staff. So we have already created a membership account with IIA it's a group account, And then we are currently awaiting payment authorization to proceed.
Okay, thanks.
Once we-
So
Yeah.
so
once
we're moving from item number 7 to number 8. So just to recap, number 7, the COC underspend audit we covered, the signature authority audit is underway. Those fell outside of the internal audit plan that we have, but then in terms of moving through our plan for this year, you're in the process of the for the provider invoice processing and payment controls audit. We're working through that. Okay, and now in terms of the follow-up from number 8 update, unless you have any questions on that, Commissioner Stringer. Okay, on item number 8, the update on the action plans for the next meeting. The IAA membership is in process. That's awesome. Great. It's going to help us have resources. I'm glad to be able to provide your team with those professional resources to help get to understand better best practices from internal audit functions across the industry. So it's good, and also will help our commission understand what we need, and we can access that. So that's great. So thank you for facilitating that.
Thank you. And then we were asked to create a channel for the public comments, public input for internal audit. So a dedicated internal audit email has been established. It's internalaudit@lasa.org, which will be published on the LASA website to support centralized communication and public intake.
Okay, I'll say it again. So it's internalaudit@lasa.org if people want to send us any information and suggestions of things that we should take a look at. Thanks for having that set up, and I appreciate the IT team for setting that up. Great. I think that was all we had, right?
Yes, that's all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right. For item number 9, review of action items. So then you're going to work on, I think you know what you are working on. The COC underspend, we should hear back about that. Signature authority, we should get an update. And we should also get an update on the payment inventory process payment controls audit. Any agenda requests for future meetings?
Not at this point in time. Thanks.
Thanks. Any public comment?
We don't have any, Commissioner.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Aram.